So background with Steven is we met and we like connected really fast, and we're already talking about like, you know, we might want to marry each other and maybe have kids. And he was living in a studio apartment in New York, and I was in transition. I was staying at my parents, and he like invited me to move in with him like a few months after we met. And then like quickly I wasn't feeling very good in the relationship, and I kept thinking like I just kept trying to do more work on myself, right? Like, and then I started to think, oh, well, you know, we're living together in a studio apartment, like that he lived in with his ex-wife, and, you know, it's like his space. Maybe we need to like kind of move to another space that's for both of us, or, you know, renovate his apartment so there's like more room, you know. And I kept asking him like if we could kind of co-create a vision together that basically that made space for me. And his thing was like, well, if you're unhappy, like, because I started to, you know, I would express that I was unhappy, and then he would of course feel like defensive or protective and like kind of pull back, and you know, you're not going to want to move somewhere or deepen in your plans with someone if you are not feeling secure in the first place. But for me, I was like, well, I need things to change before I can feel better. And I just didn't feel like emotionally nourished by him. But then I'd be like, well, you know, maybe I'm being like too needy, and you know, he wasn't very affectionate. He wasn't that expressive. He drank a lot. He worked really a lot. And I just kept thinking I need to, you know, make myself happy. And when we had the space to connect, it was really good. And so I was hoping that changing external circumstances, or, you know, that somehow it would change the way I felt. I wasn't trusting my feelings. I felt like I was like being, you know, immature or needy and all that. Eventually, he ended that because he was like, I can't do this anymore. And it hurt, but I was actually really glad. And I could see like, okay, how I'm doing the same thing with Tony. Like, I mean, Tony's a totally different person, and he and I have like, I do feel emotionally nourished by him. We do, we have great connection and a great time together, but there are just, for whatever reason, I haven't been able to surrender totally to like the idea of being with him. That's why I've been like ambivalent for 4 years. It's like, but I haven't been able to like figure out why, like what's not good enough, and so I keep thinking, oh, well, if maybe I do more work on myself, you know, maybe I'm just too afraid to open to love, or, you know, I'm afraid of intimacy, or I need to be more understanding. Like, I'm not accepting him enough. Like, I'm being judgmental and, you know, too idealistic, like all of these thoughts. And there's like this desire or fantasy, right, to really make it work. And so I had this idea of like, oh, well, maybe if I surrender to him and we do this course and we're like physically intimate, and, you know, we improve our health habits together, like, then, you know, and what am I hoping for? Like that then I will feel solid in the relationship, like then I'll be happy, then I'll feel secure. So I was noticing all of that, and I was thinking about my parents, and like, because I was also reviewing the notes that had come up in my work with that relationship coach, and My mom, so what I noticed with my parents is, like ever since I was young, I just thought that they shouldn't have been together. Like my mom would have been happier with someone else, because my perspective on my parents was that, you know, my mom was always like kind of complaining about my dad, like, and yeah, like emasculating him. And it was just like, why are you with him? You know, as I did this work with this coach and like talked to my parents directly instead of like projecting what I thought was going on, I realized, you know, my mom really does love my dad, and he actually treats her really well in many ways, and especially when they first got together. And I could see how, you know, if anyone feels that their parents being together is a mistake, you're basically saying that you're a mistake, right? That I am a mistake because my parents shouldn't have been together. And you know, when my mom was pregnant with me, she found out my dad was having an affair, and she actually said to him, we can't do anything about Reggie, my older brother, but like, I'm not having another kid with you. And so she threatened to abort me. And so that idea of like being a mistake, or unwanted is, in my system. And also, like, I've had multiple lifetimes where I was killed as a baby, for being born a girl, and in cultures where it wasn't valued, girls weren't valued. And so I was like, oh, I could see why, like, you know, part of the fear when you're like, this fear of like making the right choice is a fear about making a mistake, right? That somehow I'm going to make the wrong choice and it's going to negatively affect the rest of my life, or I'm going to miss out on something that I'm meant for. And so I was like, wow, if I feel like fundamentally that I am a mistake, then I could see how I'm afraid of having that projected in my outer life, right? Like the fact that I'm a mistake being reflected in mistakes that I'm making and experiencing. And with my mom, you know, I was like, oh, she could have chosen to either like leave my father if she really wasn't happy, and but she didn't, you know, either have the courage to do that, or she didn't really want to, you know, she really wanted to be with him. And then I was like, okay, or you choose to stay and, you know, be more loving, like notice the ways in which you're unsatisfied and kind of putting it on him and work on that, right? But she didn't. I don't think she had the awareness to do that. And so I was looking at like, how am I doing that with Tony, and like be in this relationship with him, but like kind of not totally feel satisfied and like kind of blame him for that. Or am I going to let us go and admit that, you know, this isn't really what I want? Or is it to like continue working on myself, because that inherent dissatisfaction or whatnot is something in me that I'm projecting. So, you know, I was sitting with all that, and then there was a deeper place. So that anger that was from when I was 35 and had gone through this with Stephen, it was actually, the root of it was an ancestral anger that I've carried, and it was a great grandmother, and she was unhappily married, and she died with this like deep resentment and anger. Like she was like, you know, why did I have to be with this person, you know, in this lifetime? What like a waste, and just really unhappy. And the lesson was like, again, she always had a choice. She could have liberated herself, and maybe that didn't feel like a choice in that time. Or she could have, you know, like opened to love, like chosen to love her life and herself instead of holding on to anger and resentment and feeling like a victim.